Okay, good evening, everyone. We are back again for another week in PIRKEI AVOS and the ethics of our fathers. And I'd like to turn this evening to the second chapter of PIRKEI AVOS. And we find ourselves in the first Mishnah. And the first Mishnah is quite long, and I'm going to start from the middle of that Mishnah. And the Mishnah writes towards the middle end the following words. V'histakel b'shloisha devarim. A person should be mistakel, they should look very carefully at three things. V'ata bal yidei avera. And if you look at those three things carefully, Dovid Bernstein all the way from Passaic, New Jersey, good evening. V'histakel b'shlosha devarim. If you look at three things, v'ata bal yidei avera, you will not come liyidei, to the hands of sin. So what three things could you possibly look at in this world that will remind you and that will prevent you from coming to the hands of sin? Da ma lemala mimcha. You must know what is above from you. Know what is above you. You're not looking at anything yet, but know what is above you. Now what is it that is above us? Ayin roya, there is an eye that sees. V'oizen shayma'as, there is an ear that hears. V'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavin, and all of your actions, every single thing that a person does, it is b'sefer nichtavin, it is written inside of a book. The Mishnah over here is saying something which is a bit wondrous and difficult to understand. A person struggles constantly in their life between, as we've spoken about many times, doing what is right and what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, mitzvah versus avera. And a person obviously would like to be the best they could be. That's what we're all going to ask for on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We are going to assure HaKadosh Baruch Hu that even if we made mistakes this previous year, and we didn't do everything that we should have done to be the best me that I could have been, I promise you, Hashem, beyond the shadow of a doubt, the up and coming year, I'll be the best person possible. Now, how does a person become the best person possible? So obviously, the more that I behave myself, the more that I fill my day and my time with mitzvahs, with commandments which are good, the more that I steer clear of the averas of the sinful behavior, the better person I'm going to be. Says the Mishnah over here, I want to give you a piece of advice. And if you will just focus in on these three things, guaranteed, you will not even come to the grips, to the hands of the sin, let alone the sin itself. So what should you look at? Ayin roya, you should see that there's an eye that is looking at you. Da, you should know that there's an oizen shamas, there's an ear that is listening. And you should know, all of your deeds, all of your actions, everything that you do is going to be written down inside of a book. The Mishnah over here is asking for something that is above what is the average pay grade of a human being in this world. We live in a physical world. We see things that are in front of us. You can see your friend, you can see the screen in front of you. When you're driving down the street, you can see the car that is next to you, you can see the billboards on the sidewalk, you can see a store. When you walk into the store, you can see everything that's on the shelves. If it's a grocery store, you'll see food. If you walk to the department store, you'll see clothing. If you walk into an electronics store, you'll see all the electronics. We go into an airplane, we fly out, we look through the window over there, 36,000 feet up, you look down on a little tiny speck of a world, but you can see the clouds, you can see what's going on. Something that is ruchnius, that is spiritual, a person is not able to see. That's why it's spiritual. A person cannot see their neshama. A person cannot see the Ribono Shel Olam. A person cannot see the Shekhinah here in this world. A person is not able to see beyond the physical world with their eyes and see a world of ruchni, a world of spirituality. And yet the Mishnah over here is telling us that if in fact you want to be able to guard yourself from doing any sin, then there's one piece of advice that we can give you. You have to learn how to see things that you can't see. You have to know things in such tangibility that once that you become aware of that essence of that thing, then you'll say, oh, wait, Hashem is watching me, His eye is watching, His ear is hearing, He's writing things down in a book. And then you'll guard yourself from sin. Does Hashem have eyes? Does Hashem have eyes that are looking down on you? An eye in row, does He have one eye that's watching you? Does Hashem have ears like we have? That as you get older you have to ask the barber, please shave off the hair that's there? Does He have an ear? Does HaKadosh Baruch have a hand and a diary over there in the heavens where He's actually writing down everything that we do? And yet the Mishnah tells us that if you don't think like this, then you will not be able to guard yourself and protect yourself from the grips of sin, and certainly from the sin itself. The Mishnah seems to be describing to us something that is extremely valuable in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls. Something that exists by a human being which most likely does not exist by other animals in this kingdom. And that is something called the imagination that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us. He has given us the koyach hamachshava. He has given us the ability to think, the ability to have a vision, to see things that ourselves are not in front of us. But as we begin to use the juices of creativity that is in our minds, we are able to begin to see things that even though they might not exist right now, and we might not be aware exactly what they look like, however, if we use the koyach, the power of creativity and of originality and ingenuity that we have in our minds, we will be able to imagine and envision something that perhaps is beyond us. But when we begin to think about it in the right way and use that creative mind that we have, it will become something that is real to us. One of the great American Gedolei Yisrael was Rav Mordechai Gifter Zatzal. And when he was a young man, a teenager, he had hanging in his room pictures of many Gedolei Yisrael, many of the great leaders of the Jewish people. Perhaps he had the Chavetz Chaim, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, maybe Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector, all the greats, the great leaders from that generation, and a little bit earlier as well. And all the pictures were strewn across his room. And in one frame, it was empty and it was blank. And in the picture frame, instead of a picture, it said, you. So somebody came to him once and they asked him, Mordechai, what is that one all about? He said, I look at all the pictures of the Gedolim, of these great rabbinical leaders, the righteousness, the greatness in their Torah, their scholarship, their midos, their character traits. And I yearn to be one of them. So I put a frame up there, and I left it empty, and I remind myself that if I in fact will work hard enough, and I will make the efforts that are necessary, and I will apply myself with my brains and with my heart and with my soul and my abilities, then maybe one day my picture will end up on the wall as well. And sure enough, a young man from America, in a time when Torah was certainly didn't have the same prime experience that it has in the world today. He grew up in Baltimore, if I'm not mistaken, and he ended up going to YU earlier on in his life, and he met an incredible Rabbi there who mesmerized him in the Torah, and eventually from there sent him off to Tels in Europe, where he learned 5 straight years of his life, and he began to become the Mordechai Gifter that would come back and be a treasure to the Jewish people. And in fact, in the homes of many people, if you look on the wall and you'll see who is there, you will see a picture of a man with a gigantic smile, radiating happiness and radiating Torah and radiating Kedusha. And that is Rav Mordechai Gifter. Because when you begin to use your mind to imagine and to envision and to dream of something that could be in the future, even though that you cannot see it here right now in front of you, then eventually the powers of your thoughts will motivate you on the inside to be able to live. The thoughts will draw you in that direction. The Mishnah over here is addressing one of the fundamental issues and difficulties that each and every one of us has in the world of Amunah, in our belief in Hashem. We live, as we pointed out in the very beginning, we live in a world that is lamaisa, that is actuality. We live in a world that you can touch, you can taste, you can smell, you can hear. That's the world that we live in, the world of senses. And the things that are beyond us, very hard to understand. We know that there are galaxies out there in space. We never went there before. But we know there are galaxies and galaxies because the Hubble telescope has told us that it is there. Whether a human being will ever reach those far-off points or not is irrelevant, but we know that it's there. We know that there is a brain inside of a person and there's brain waves. Now we can't see the waves. The scientists maybe could see more. But there are thoughts that are going on. You can't see the thoughts, can you? But you know that there's thoughts inside of you. One of the greatest struggles that a person has in this world is you must believe in a God that you cannot see. You must fear a God that you cannot see. You must put all of your faith into a Rabbi Hashem, to a master of the universe that you cannot hear talk to you. And you don't hear he talks to anybody else either. And yet our emunah, our faith, is predicated on this belief that although that I cannot see him, I cannot touch him, I cannot taste him, I cannot smell him, I cannot feel him, but I know that Hashem is here. How am I supposed to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here? So the Mishnah tells us a fascinating idea. And that is, work with what you have. Don't work with what you don't have. You don't have an image of Hashem because you can't see God. You don't know what his voice sounds like because you never heard it before. You don't know exactly what he's doing up there because he never shared that with you. But work with what you have. And every time that we find in the Chumash, as the Rambam tells us, that Hashem is referred to in human characteristics, whether it's the outstretched hand, whether it's the nostrils that are flaring his anger, whether he's the man of war that split the sea for the Jewish people. Whenever we find human characteristics ascribed to the Ribbono Shel Olam, chas v'shalom, God forbid to think for a moment that he has flaring nostrils, or that he has an outstretched arm, or that he has an eye that sees. God forbid, he doesn't have a body. But the Torah is speaking to us in our language so that we should be able to understand, to the best of our human abilities, the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is working here in this world. We work with what we have, and we stretch our imagination beyond in order that we can begin to comprehend the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in our lives and running this world. And so the Mishnah tells us over here, one of the greatest challenges that a human being has is guarding themselves from hate, from sin. And everybody knows this, the famous Gemara. The Gemara says that one of the Amoraim was passing away. Could have been as even Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and they said to him, Rabbeinu Barachenu, give us a bracha. Give us a blessing. And he said, Halavai, it should be, I wish that it would be, that yiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the fear that you have of Hashem would at least be as much of yiras basar v'dam as the fear that you have of flesh and blood. And the student said, Rabbeinu, ad kan, that's as much fear that you want us to have of Hashem? He said, halavai, that you'll have that much. I wish that you'll have that much. And the understanding is simple. A person drives down the road, free and clear, on that open freeway, 75, 85, 90 miles per hour. Nobody in sight, no other cars on the road. It's called a joyride. You're enjoying yourself. And suddenly, out of the corner of your eye, just maybe about 50 feet ahead, you see hiding in the brush one of those police cars who's waiting to catch foolish people like yourself that are speeding down the freeway. And suddenly, nothing changed except that there's a car 50 feet away from you that you know, if he sees you speeding, he's going to give you a ticket. And if you're going 100 miles per hour, you are in big trouble. So what do? Immediately, your foot jumps from the gas, goes onto the brake, you slow down immediately 65 miles per hour, you drive by, wave to the officer, and you keep going. Says the Gemara, I wish, the sage told his students, I wish that your fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu would at least be as much as the fear that you have of basar v'dam, of flesh and blood, of a police officer. There used to be a time when people feared the police officers. Now, hopefully one day we'll get back to that time. Because that's the point. When you know that there's someone who's in power, when you know there's someone that could catch you doing wrong, it's like the child who's hiding something from his parents. And as long as the parents are not around, he's fine. He's fine, he's happy, he's joking around, he's playing, he doesn't care, he has no concern. But the minute he hears his father's steps coming into the room, suddenly the kid starts shaking and trembling, and he tries to hide that thing that he has in his hand someplace, but it's too late. My father has caught me. And the father looks with that stern look, and the son looks with those puppy dog eyes, and then the son starts breaking down crying, and the father says, no, no, no. Hand it over. The kid wasn't afraid 5 seconds ago. He was enjoying himself while he was playing with this toy, or eating that food, or doing whatever he knows that he wasn't supposed to be doing at that time. But once that the father walks into the room, the authoritative figure in his life, everything changes. Says the Mishnah, how difficult it is for a person to guard themselves from doing sin. Because if you don't know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here, and you're not aware that He's watching you, and that He knows everything that you are doing, and when you're sitting on your phone late at night, and you're yakking away to one of your friends, the juiciest Lashon Hara in the world, you don't know that Hashem is listening to every word that you say. So then how is a person going to guard themselves liyidei avera, from the hands and the grips of the sin itself? Therefore, says the Mishnah, let us start with that which we have already. And let us begin to use our koyach hamachshava, our thoughts, our creativity, to be able to design for ourselves a vision of the Ribbono Shel Olam that is something that is possible, that you and I could be able to understand. And then we will live in our mind's eye with this reality that there is an eye and there is an ear and there is a hand that is writing down everything that we are doing. Now the mind is a very powerful vessel, a very powerful kli. We know the Gemara tells us that Pirkei Avos, the thoughts of the sinful thoughts that a person has, sometimes is kasha min aver atzmai, worse than the sin itself. A person sins, that's it, it's over. But a person has hirurim, they have stray thoughts. They have thoughts that dig deep and delve deep into the world of fantasy, into the world of lust, into the world of dimyonos, which is, I don't know how you say in English, but dimyonos are the illusionary world. A person's mind just reels and it doesn't stop. And he's building in his mind, he's better than a Hollywood movie. He's got it all down pat. His mind is swimming in the schmutz of this world. And he's not even there. He's sitting in his room. He's sitting on a couch. He's driving in his car. He sees one thing out the window over there, and his mind begins reeling and starts playing tricks on him. And he thinks about things. He never even experienced such things in his life, but his mind knows how to think. The mind is a muscle of creativity. And it can envision and it can see things that it doesn't ever experience, but it can think of them on such a clear level, and it will become, as the Gemara says, the thoughts of the Avera is worse than the Avera itself. Because in your mind you can do 1,000 times worse than you're actually going to execute in this world. Dr. Seuss, the man of imagination. I'm not sure how you come up with some of these pictures and these stories that are going on over there. But you're looking at a man whose mind is somewhere in the world of creativity and imagination in the history of the world. Certainly he probably has a Pulitzer Prize for something over there. Is that what our imagination was meant for? Is that what our brains, the vision to see what we could do, what we could become, what we could be, is that what it was meant for? I'm not coming to knock green eggs and ham. I'm sure there's a good purpose, reason why we have that in the history of America for our children, I'm sure. But why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us the creative juices? And this is why the world becomes very difficult for us. Because when you live in a world like we do, which is a world that is based on imagery, a world that is based on illusion, a world that is based on fantasy, every movie, every ad, every advertisement, every commercial, every video game, every virtual reality game that they have, it's all illusion, it's all fantasy. And in our mind, the way that our mind begins to work, we begin to think that's reality. You go to the movie theater, you sit down in the movies, and you're sitting there, and there's images in front of you. Violence, maybe it's romance, maybe it's sports, maybe it's drama, maybe it's chivalry, whatever it might be. Suspense. It's not happening, it's phony, it's fake. But the music is in the background, and the screen is coming, and the lights are there, and the actors are acting top notch. And they get you into their world of fantasy. But there's nothing real about it. It's all illusion. And then when we try to come back to reality and look in front of us, what is real? What is really going on in front of us? The world of fantasy overtakes our mind, and it's very hard to be able to see the truth that sometimes is right under our nose. So Chazal tell us, your experience, your relationship, your insight, your wisdom, your understanding, your perception of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you have has great limitations. And that's why you sin. Because you live in fantasy land. You live in a world where you think there is no eye that is watching you. You live in a world where you think nobody hears what you have to say. You live in a world where you think nothing is being written down. Because look around, do you see such a thing? Do you see this big eye sticking out of the heavens staring down at you? No, you don't. Do you see the big hand of Hashem with his quill pen writing over there everything you do? No, you don't. And therefore, says the Mishnah, you will come you will come to sin. Because you're like the man that's driving on the freeway, and there's no police officer around, and you're driving and driving and driving and driving, and you think that you are free and clear to do what you want. But when a person begins to use their brain and they begin to use their imagination and they begin to create a vision of something that is abstract and they're trying to make it more tangible, when they begin to use their thoughts and their ideas and their ingenuity to take something that is beyond our grasp and something that we can begin to touch and hold on to, when a person begins to look around the world and see the way that things work, and then realize the whole entire universe is really just an expression of the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world itself. So I can look at an eye, and I can realize that that itself is just a symbol that there's an eye that's up there in the heavens and is watching me. When I look at my ear, and I think the way that it works, and I know that it hears things, and I can hear people talking, and I can hear people singing, and hears people talking about me even when I'm not supposed to hear it. So then I begin to realize my ears are just a symbol of the gigantic eyes in the gigantic ear that is there in the heavens, that is literally listening to every single thing that I say. And when I open up a history book, the Sefer HaZichronos, the book of memories, the book of events which took place, and I begin reading all the things that took place a year ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, I realize someone's been keeping track all these years. So that it reminds me that there is a Rabbi Shalom in the heavens who is watching and listening, and he's writing it all down so it should never be forgotten. So then my mind begins to go into a place of creativity where it's able to take the intangible and it makes it tangible. It takes the abstract and it concretizes it. It takes that which is out of my grasp and it brings it into my frame of reference and my reality. And then once that a person begins to think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that way, so then a person will be saved from doing sin. Because my emunah, my faith, my belief that I have in Hashem is not just lip service, yeah, I believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it becomes a tangible emunah, a tangible faith, which is something that I'm able to live with. Not, as the Ramchal writes, not that you should walk around nervous and shaking all the time. You can't accomplish anything like that. A person who walks around trembling with every step that he takes, how will you ever be confident? How will you ever be secure? How will you ever come to daven? Because every time that you daven, you're always nervous. I'm saying the wrong words. Maybe I don't have enough kavanah, enough intention. Oy vey, what a waste of my tefillah. You go through a Yom Tiv, a beautiful Yom Tiv, a Rosh Hashanah that's coming, and a person who's shaking like a leaf because he's always worried Hashem is watching, Hashem is listening, Hashem is there. Maybe he won't accept any of my prayers. What are you going to do? Hashem doesn't want that. Hashem doesn't want us to walk around cringing in fear. Hashem wants us to walk around being aware that He's watching, being quite aware that He's listening, and having our eyes open to see that He's writing it all down. Why? So that we then will try to do the best that we can to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because when I know that Hashem is watching, I have to behave myself. When I know that Hashem is listening, I have to be careful with what I say. When I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is writing it down, I want to make sure it's a good book. I want some good chapters in that story that He's writing about me every single day of my life. Not to tremble in fear, but rather what we would call probably yiras haroimamos, which is a fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is an awe of Hashem, which is basking in the glory and the splendor, the awesomeness of Hashem, recognizing just how powerful and how great He is, and therefore I am going to try my best to be in line what He wants me to do. Says the Mishnah, you know how you accomplish that? The same brain that you use to think about how to do sin and succeed the best way. The same brain that is maharhir ba'aveira, that is so clever and so creative and can take you around the world in 80 seconds and make you do all the most heinous of things. Use your brain for something that is positive. Begin to train yourself to be a visionary and begin to see the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs this world. The Horowitz, talking probably about 100 years ago, he made over the following statement. It was at a time when the cameras were becoming much more popular, and towards the end of the Horowitz Chaim's life, they had just begun to produce films. So there were cameras, not video cameras, but reel-to-reel cameras that would go around, they would film events. And the Horowitz Chaim said that, do you know why we have all of these gadgets? Do you know why there's a camera? Do you know why there is a video machine? Do you know why why we have all this? It's to teach us that the words of our sages are emes, are true. Because once you have a camera, that means you can take a picture for all of posterity. And the event which was taking place, now it's captured. The Mishnah says, Ayin Roya, the eye sees. Do you believe that there's an eye that sees and is capturing every single picture of your life? Says the Horowitz Chaim. When you see cameras, you believe that? When you see videos being taken of people that are walking down the street, that are walking down the street, and they are doing things. So then you begin to believe, not only does the eye see and record everything in frames, it's recording everything in real time as well. And who could understand better than our generation? We live in a generation that if somebody in New York City does something at 5:06 p.m., by 5:08 p.m. the entire world knows what he's done. Because somebody was there with their phone, and they record it, and then it's got to go viral, because everything has to go viral these days. And then it goes viral, and the next thing you know, the whole world is watching what this person did over there in New York City at 5:06 p.m. when they did X, Y, and Z. Ayin Roya, the eye sees. It sees it, and it records it, and it takes it in, and it shares it. It shares it with what's going on up there. There's a very famous concept that the Svarim HaKadoshim, that the more mystical works tell us, and that is that a person is going to leave this world after 120 years, and they'll arrive at the pearly gates, and they're looking so forward into going into Gan Eden and basking in the glory of the Shekhinah. But before they can go in, of course, there's going to be a judgment. Hashem resides as the judge of the world, and He begins examining all of your actions and your deeds from your lifetime. And then He holds up a picture, and He says, do you recognize this person? And you look at the picture, somebody with a long white beard, piercing blue eyes, face is translucent with kedusha, with holiness that is radiating out of the cheeks over there. And they look so sweet and so warm and so kind and so nice. And you look and say, no, was that one of the tzaddikim, one of the righteous people from a previous generation? And Hashem says, no, take a better look. Look at that person. And you're looking, I don't know. Who is that? And Hashem says, that's you. And you say to Hashem, that's me. You want to use my glasses, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Can you see what's going on over here? I don't look like that. I don't shine like that. I don't glow like that. I don't talk like that. I don't learn like that. I don't daven like that. What do you mean that's me? Look at me. You know who I am, Hashem. And Hashem says, no. I know who you are, but I just want to show you the picture of who you could have become had you had a vision, had you had a goal, had you had an imagination of what you could have accomplished, what you could have become in this lifetime. But since that you used your imagination and you used your mind for other things, you fantasized about this and about that. You dreamed about the car you're going to drive and about the house you're going to live in and about the clothes that you're going to wear and the money that you're going to make. You were dreaming about the fancy vacations to Luxuryville over there that were going to be just, the delight and the geschmack that you would ever have. So therefore you look like you look. Because you never had enough in your mind to be able to see beyond just the world in front of you and see what it is that you possibly could have become. Which reminds us of the world-famous story of the Nitziv. The Nitziv was one of the great Rosh Yeshivas of the Volozhiner Yeshiva. He was one of the Gedolei Yisrael of his generation. He lived and he learned and he served Klal Yisrael tremendously in his life. He was a super genius. He wrote so many svarim, so many books. He was well liked and beloved by his nation. He was a true leader of the Jewish people. And the Nitziv once finished writing one of his famous svarim, his works. Perhaps it was the Emik Dover. And he called people in. He wanted to make what's called a Sudas Haidah, a festive meal of celebration. And people came. It was an unusual thing. The Nitziv was a very humble man. He wasn't the one that should really show off his accomplishments, but he did it anyway. And he got up at this Sudas Haidah, this meal of gratitude, and he said, "You're probably wondering why I, the Nitziv, am making such a festive meal like this. I'm not to show off my learning and the books that I've written. I'm doing it because I want to give praise and thanks to Hashem. Because when I was a young boy, I will tell you the truth, I was not into my learning. I could have really cared less. I was a kid. I was a vivacious, wilde chaya type of a kid, running here and playing there and doing all different things, and I was not learning at all. Until one day I came home, and my mother and my father are in the other room and the door is closed, and I hear my mother and my father having a very loud conversation. And I hear my father say, no, so what? So he'll be a shoemaker. He'll be an erlich shoemaker. What's the big deal? He'll learn, he'll daven in the morning, he'll learn a little bit, he'll make shoes. He'll be a nice person, a good erlich yid. And I hear my mother crying, what are you talking about? Naftali Tzvi Yehuda. He has so much greatness, so much potential inside of him. How can he not use it to serve Hashem? And again my father said, no, what can we do? The Rebbe said he's not learning. The other Rebbe said he's not really so smart. What are you supposed to do? And my mother was crying, and I look through the keyhole over there, and I see my mother crying. How could Naftali Tzvi Yehuda not apply himself and learn? I don't understand. And when I saw that, the pain that my mother was in, because I was not living up to the image that she herself had of what I could be, I accepted on myself at that moment that I'm going to do whatever I possibly can to pull out that potential which I don't see and become somebody great that will be a nachas to my mother. And so here I am making a Sudas Haidah, a meal of gratitude, he said. Why? Because I just completed, it was like his third or fourth sefer that he had written. And I was thinking to myself the following: what if I never ever heard my mother crying? What if I didn't walk into the room at that moment? You know what would have happened to me? Nothing. I would have gone on being this mischievous little kid. I would have played around all my years in yeshiva. Eventually I would have left yeshiva. I would have become a shoemaker. I've been an erlich person, of course. I would have davened in the morning. I would have learned a little bit, but I would have made shoes all day long. And I would come up to Shemaim, to the heaven, and HaKadosh Baruch would say to me, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda, What do you have to show for yourself? And I would say, hey Hashem, look at these beautiful shoes that I made. You like them? Leather, look how nice and shiny. And Hashem said, no, I want to see the Emek Davar. And I would say, the what? And he would say, I want to see the Emek Davar. And I would say, you want to see what? And he would say, I want to see the sefer that you wrote on Chumash. And I would say, the sefer that I wrote on Chumash, are you kidding me, Hashem? I'm a shoemaker. Shoemakers don't write svarim with commentaries on the Chumash and the Torah. And Hashem would have said, Oy, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda. What you could have become in your life if you would have just had a vision and seen who you are. You would have become the great Nitziv. You would have been the father of the yeshivas. You would have been the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin Yeshiva. You would have led our generation. But you never saw the greatness that was inside of you. And you became the simple shoemaker. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says over the following to Klal Yisrael. Yes, I am abstract. Yes, I am concealed. Yes, I am intangible for the most part in the physical world that we live in. But you've got such a great imagination. You dream, you imagine, you daydream, you fantasize, all the different things that go on inside of your head. You go places in your mind that you never went to and you never will go to. You engage in acts, whether they are good or whether they're bad, that you never ever did before in your life. And it's so real, it's so tangible, you feel like you're there. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, make me real. That's part of the process of Emunah. Emunah doesn't just stay up in the clouds all day long. I believe. But I believe and I'm margish, I feel the Emunah, I feel the belief that is inside of me. When the Ribbono Shel Olam's existence becomes something that is tangible to you, then your Emunah becomes something that is real. And when your Emunah is real, because you are able to believe and to see and to sense that there's an eye in Raya, there's an eye that is watching, that there is an ear that is hearing, and that there is a Sefer Nichtavim, there's a book that is writing down everything inside of there. Says the Mishnah, you know what the great benefit of using your brains for the right thing is? I'ata ba liyidei aveira. You won't even come to the hands, to the clutches of sin. Let alone, of course, the sin itself. The mind is so powerful and it's so strong that if only we would invite the presence of Hashem into our lives, we would begin to be able to see and to feel and to understand and to live with Hashem. And when you're living with Hashem, when He's in your mind's eye, when da, ma, lamala mimcha, know what is above from you, da mi'ata oimed, the front of, know who you are standing in front of. When a person begins to live like that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is right here in front of us. We come every year to the Yomim Noraim, days of awe. They're awesome, glorious days where we're supposed to be so elevated from the davening. If you think about it, the siyata d'shemaya, the heavenly assistance that a person receives during Rosh Hashanah, 2 days, locked in prayer. From night through the morning, through the afternoon, through the night, locked totally in prayer. Page after page after page after page, song after song after song. It's almost an impossible marathon of tefillah, of prayer that we go through. But Hashem gives us the ability. He gives us the wherewithal to be able to engage in those prayers. And what is the core of all of the prayers that we have on the Yomim Noraim? What is that one word which rings out again and again and again? HaMelech. Hashem is the King. But how can you make Hashem the king if you don't see him? How can you believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is actually deciding Mi Yichya, who is going to live and who is going to die, if he's not in your mind's eye? How can we believe that everything that transpired in Tav, Shin, Pei this past year, and that means everything, coronavirus, the riots, the wild political situation that is going on in the world, the devastations of families, the unrest in Klal Yisrael, the disappointments, the frustrations that everybody had in their life. How can you begin to live and believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided everything last year on Rosh Hashanah if you are not living with the Ribbono Shel Olam? Tzaddik be'emunasa yichya. A righteous person, be'emunasa, with his emunah yichya, he will live. You want to be alive with the Ribbono Shel Olam? You have to infuse your emunah with chiyus, with life as well. And the only way, or one of the ways that we are going to infuse our emunah, that it becomes something that's tangible, is we learn to use our imaginations in the right way, and we begin to conjure up in our thoughts the ideas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being the master and the ruler and the king, who is totally aware of every little detail that is going on in the world and everything that we do. And we are inescapable, because Hashem is watching, and Hashem is listening, and Hashem is totally aware. And when a person brings themselves just even a little bit up on the scale of emunah, where before I'm about to do something, I stop and I think to myself, Hashem is watching. I'm about to say some Lashon Hara, Hashem is listening. I'm about to go and do this thing, Hashem is writing it down. Then guess what? The benefit is, says the Mishnah, you will stop yourself. Because just like when you're speeding down the road and you see the cop car, you stop. Just like the little kid who's misbehaving in the house, the moment that he even just hears the car pull up into the driveway and he knows that Tati and Mommy are home, he begins to behave himself. Just like the child is in the classroom, has no problem passing the notes around from their friends until they realize that the teacher is watching and sees every single note that's being passed. And then they stop. So too, when we live with the reality that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching us and He's aware of what we're doing, then we in turn will hold ourselves back and stop ourselves from doing the wrong things. We can use our imagination for nonsense. We can use our imagination for sinful ideas. We can use our imagination. How many people, they live in their imagination? They live, oh, if I'll meet this person, this is what I will say. Then you never ever meet that person. You know, if I'll make the X amount of dollars, then I'll be able to take my vacation that I want to take, and you never make that money. You know, if I had this car, then I would drive down that street, and I would roll down the top, and I would blast this particular song, and everybody would see me. But you never get the car. So we live all of our lives in a world that does not belongs to us. It's just illusion. But there's one reality called Hashem. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, if you'll just use your imagination with what you have, with the ideas that are tangible to you, then I, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will become something that's real to you as well. And that is what we are trying to accomplish during these days, the Yomim Noraim, the days in which we crown HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the Melech, Malchei HaMelachim, the King of the entire universe. He is the Melech that we bow down to. There are times during the davening that we actually prostrate ourselves to Hashem, and we're doing it in front of the Ribono Shel Olam. A person supposed to think like that. We are thinking to ourselves that Hashem literally has the scales of justice, and He's weighing between this and that. Which book are we going to be written down into? All there. All the ideas. And like the Horowitz told us 100 years ago, if there's a camera that can take pictures, if there's a video that can take video, so then it's no chiddush, it's not far-fetched to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is recording everything. And in our generation, all the more so do we understand that everything is being recorded. Our conversations, our actions, what we do, where we go, it's all there on the screen. Viral. In the heavens, it's gone viral. We just hope that it's good viral that it went. So as we come to Rosh Hashanah, and we prepare ourselves for the glorious days of Aseret Tshuva and Yom Kippur, let us keep in mind these words over here in the Mishnah, that these things, as the Taisus Yom Tov writes, Lefi she'istaklus haze'eno b'riach chushis, it's not the physical eyes that we are talking about. Aval b'rias haseichel, your mind has to begin to swim and has to begin to plumb the depths over here. Lekach chazav v'amar, that's why it says you should know das, which is up here. Das, right, Dovid Bernstein? Das, we know about das. Das is when a person is able to fuse together his chachma, his wisdom, and his beat and his deeper understanding, and he applies it to the world. So you take all of the wisdom that you learned in your life, you take all the shirim that you heard in your life about Emunah, and you translate it into reality. And that's in your mind's eye, right over here. You begin to see what it's all about. And this is our job and our task. As we stand in shul, you're not standing before no one. You're not davening to nobody. You're not reading the words in the machzor again and again and again about Hashem being the king, and He wants to rule over the world, and He wants everyone to bow down, and He wants everyone. It's not just words, lip service. It's reality. We get so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Yom Noraim. And the vision that we have of Hashem becomes something that is so strong. By the time the final notes of Ne'ilah are over, a person should feel that they are literally standing in front of the Ribono Shel Olam, and they are with Him as one, and that He is Hashem Hu Elokim. No doubt in our eyes, He's right here. When a person lives like that, then they go into a world, they go into an existence that is totally different than what it is that we have right now. So may HaKadosh Baruch Hu be mezaka us, may He give us the strength and the insight and the wherewithal not to use our minds for fantasy island and fantasy land and the like, but rather to use our minds to fantasize about the Ribono Shel Olam, to make something that is abstract, something that is concrete, something that is far from our frame of reference. Let's bring it in, let's bring it home. How do we do that? Begin to think, and begin to study, and begin to spend the time that is necessary to understand that not only is HaKadosh Baruch Hu the Melech, the King, as it is written in the words, but in the reality of creation and of this world, Hashem is HaMelech, Hashem is the King. And if He is the King, Hashem, we are your servants. And if we are His servants and we abide by the rules and the edicts of the King, and we try our best to follow in line with what the King wants from us, then what's going to be the reward? The reward is that we will be saved from the hands of hate, of sin. Why? Because when you're driving and the policeman is always right next to you, you do not speed. When you are a child and your parents are in the room, you do not misbehave. When you are a Jew and you are living a life where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always right here with you, then not out of fear, and not because you're shaking and trembling like a leaf, and not because you're afraid of what's going to happen, but rather you are so privileged to be living together with the Ribbono Shel Olam, then you could not even think of doing a chet, of a sin, because you would never want to embarrass and to shame and to blaspheme and to rebel against the Melech Malchei Malachim, the King of the entire universe, who is sitting right beside us. We should be Zeichem Yetz Hashem, that in the schus of trying to make HaKadosh Baruch Hu more tangible in our eyes, more real in our lives, that itself will stand us in good stead on the Yomim Neroyim. Hashem will want to have another year of life together with us, where we'll make Him even more and more tangible and more real. And in that way, steer ourselves clear, the Sur Meirah, turn away from the sin, the Asay Toiv, and do the good, that we should be zeichet to a year, a Shana Toiva, a good year and a sweet year for ourselves and for all of Klal Yisrael. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure. Thank you. Dovid Bernstein, what a treat. Wow. Thank you.